All right. Baby, ready to go live?
Ready to go live, yes.
Okay, and 3, and 2, and 1, and hello, everyone.
Hey, guys.
Happy Saturday to your faces and all of your bodily parts. Here we are for episode number 76 of StorySmack featuring Mission Impossible. It's going to be great. And don't forget, we got to set this up for the podcast. I've been off my game as of late.
Do you want to do that right now?
You want to just jump right in?
To the podcast? Yeah.
Sure.
Because, well, first we're going to bring
Let
you
say,
guys
say hello
on
to Rob.
you guys who are,
hello.
Yeah. There he is. As you guys
What
who
am
are,
I?
Chopped
What am
liver,
I, Jack
apparently.
Harmon? And you're going to kill me off in the first 5 minutes? What are you doing? That's who I dressed as today, and I'm sure I didn't have. Believe it or not, I don't have an MIT T-shirt, so I went with a Kraken's T-shirt.
Nice.
Assuming
You
had
also
he
don't have
lived-
those super sexy glasses, those weird with the lights on them glasses.
I do have my Buddy Holly glasses.
Those
with
work.
the
Those
lights
work
on them.
pretty
Just-
well.
I,
yeah.
I concur. Had he lived, he would have easily been an
Hey,
INF
Terry
Krakens
Davis,
fan.
so nice
Exactly
to see you
right.
out there.
So that's
Say hi
very
to
good.
Mary for
Smart
me.
people do that.
So-
So hi, everybody.
So you guys who are watching, as you may or may not know, we put this in the podcast feed as well. So we do this, we say hello, we bring Rob on, and then we restart so that it's less work editing. So whenever Scott is ready to do that, we're going to jump right in with the podcast intro.
Okay, you ready? 3,
Are you ready?
2, 1.
This is episode 76 of StorySmack. StorySmack is a podcast about stories and storytellers in the world of pop culture. My name is A.B. Sigler, and I'm an audiobook narrator and founding partner at Empty Set Entertainment. I'm joined each week by New York number one New York Times bestselling novelist Scott Sigler and screenwriter Rob Otto. How are you today, gentlemen?
Good.
Yeah?
Doing very good. Yeah.
I believe we
You're
have
all over
we have
my line.
we have both chosen to accept the mission, and now it's self-destructing.
Yes.
Yes, there you go. Yeah, exactly right. This week, if you guys can't tell, we are discussing the 1996 blockbuster Mission Impossible. FDO, can you give us the movie guide
Sure.
synopsis?
Here we go. Let's see. When a U.S. government operative, Ethan Hunt, and his mentor, Jim Phelps, go on a covert assignment that takes a disastrous turn, Jim is killed, and Ethan becomes the prime number one suspect. Now a fugitive, Hunt recruits brilliant hacker Luther Stickle and maverick pilot Franz Krieger to help him sneak into a heavily guarded CIA building to retrieve a confidential computer file that will prove his innocence. There you go.
So before we jump right in, I do want to see how you're doing. If you guys are listening and not watching, the three hosts, 2 of us are co-located and 1 of us is not. So how are you, Rob?
I am excellent. The good news is I don't have to be co-located because I take enough space for 2 people. So it's really working out well.
Having the Kraken's jersey to your left basically makes it look like there's 2 people there anyway. So you're
my other left.
Your other left, exactly.
Thank you.
And each week we make a cocktail. It can be themed if it can be themed. This week the movie that we're going to discuss is Mission Impossible. So here on the left coast, I made 2 separate drinks. I made an Impossible Mission and a Mission Impossible. They
That's
are 2
amazing.
different cocktails. Scott,
What do I
you
got here?
have the Impossible Mission, which is a beautiful drink.
Yeah.
But,
Very gorgeous.
I'm not sure if you're going to like the way it tastes. So if you happen to be watching this cast, keep an eye on his face.
Let's find out.
It could be great, but it might not be.
There's some peppery stuff in here and things on the
Cinnamon on
crust
top.
on the cinnamon. Okay, here we go.
Gold dusted sugar on the rim.
It grows on you. I think
It's a little herbaceous.
Let me one more try. Well, maybe it'll grow on you. It's still got the sweet stuff in there. So,
Okay.
and what do you
And
got, baby?
I'm drinking.
What I love is that's the worst thing I ever tasted. Let me give it another taste.
Hey, you know, when I was younger, that would be like, gosh, this is terrible. Try it. So at least we've elevated from there. I am drinking the Impossible Mission. The Impossible Mission looks delicious. It should be delicious. It is Bailey's, Kahlua, and green chartreuse. So
Okay.
who knows?
Wow.
Let's see. Less delicious than it should be.
Okay, how about you, Robbie?
Right. Well, so I went for an impossible shot of vodka, just like they celebrated the beginning scene. As far as I know, it's not drugged. And what makes it impossible is I'm drinking it out of my
a
Tennessee
Titans.
Titans shot glass, and the Tennessee Titans did not exist when this movie came out.
Oh, wow.
So,
Very
Zaz-
nicely done.
za zdrowie.
I love it. Very nicely done. Oh my goodness gracious. So
To kick things off, baby, let's talk about...
Okay. A chaser would have been a smart
Chaser
idea.
would have been a smart idea. Now you can sit there and you can steep in it, brother. Steep in it. We're going to talk about general box office release. Why don't you tell us about the financials of this flick?
Sure. I always do the math work here because I'm not a writer, and these two guys are, and I understand writers are bad at math. So the original Mission Impossible, which from here on out we will be calling MI1, even though it's just called Mission Impossible. And this is your official spoiler alert before we talk about anything else. Here we go, you guys. It came out in 1996, and it cost $80 million to make, which today would be about $141 million. But that's okay because it's since made $457.7 million 1996 dollars, which today would be $806.8 million. So that $80 million budget was just fine.
The whole franchise is up at $1.2 billion now.
It's huge. And
that's not adjusted for inflation.
True.
So
True.
I think they did okay.
I think they did
and
fine.
I think we're going to talk a lot about this. We'll get into it in a little bit, but I find it like this is par for the course for this entire franchise, which is a little batshit crazy and a little fantastic all at once, all the time. So we're going to talk a little. We always start this by talking about our favorite moments about the movie. Robbie, do you want to go first?
I will go first because I need to talk about the most important thing. And despite the fact that it launched a $1 billion franchise, the best movie would have been the first 10 minutes, right? I mean, that IMF team that included the uncredited cameo from Emilio Estevez as Jack Harmon, who I am dressing in honor of today. That team was great. And that team really, epitomized what the television show in the 60s was. The team with each one having their own specialty, and they each work together, and they've been working together a long time so that they know exactly what the other person is going to do. And they can get into these situations, but they can get out using awesome teamwork. That, of course, gets all destroyed in the first 10 minutes of the movie, and then it becomes a Tom Cruise vehicle with some sidekicks that he's never worked with before. So I'm just saying the original IMF team would have been a much better movie and maybe been a $2 billion franchise. I'm just saying.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. And we'll talk
Jack
a little.
Harmon, here's to you.
We'll talk a little bit about that more as we get into discussing the movie, of course, because this is a big part of things, the difference between the series and this. But I will say that my favorite part of it starts in that same part, and the best version of it is in those same 10 minutes. But it actually goes throughout the whole show, which is I love that each MI team member in the IMF team and also after are completely they are completely counted on, they are completely trusted, they are all the things. I guess Ethan doesn't trust anybody, but other than that, and it is completely irrespective of mostly of their physicality and absolutely of their gender. So in the very, very beginning, there's one scene where Kristen Scott Thomas and Tom Cruise are up. They are pretending to make out so that they can surveil at cross points. And that's the closest we get, really, to any sexy times, except for in the trailer where Claire and Ethan kissed that never made it into the movie. Yeah. That's the closest we really get. And it's a big psychological thriller in a way. And that totally works. And I love that was 1996 and I never even thought about it until I had to start thinking about what we would talk about for the script. And I kind of love that. You don't see a lot of that back in the day.
No, you don't.
And you don't see a lot of that now either. What about you?
My favorite part of the movie is Ving Rhames, just across the board.
I agree.
The second he shows up on screen, you're like, okay, Brian De Palma, the casting director, said, we need someone who looks extraordinarily cool here. How about Ving Rhames? Wait, put some sunglasses on him. Okay, that totally. It's just like just oozes cool when you see him on the screen, which is fun because he's the computer hacker. He's supposed to be the nerdy guy, and there he is.
He's the nerd.
Yeah,
he's the nerd.
And that's actually a pretty good point about Ving Rhames across the board in movies too. I can't really think of a not cool Ving Rhames.
Some people just have that air about them, and He certainly does. I did not know that Emilio Estevez was not credited because it's not a cameo. He's got many lines of dialogue. He's got like at least 2 minutes of screen time, maybe 3.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it. Robbie brought it up, but we'll talk about it a little bit later. That was a purposeful choice, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. But why don't we start talking a little bit about the cast and crew, and then we'll go from there into some of the fun stuff that we want to talk about.
Through all this.
Okay.
Hold on.
That's all good.
Go and get started with Mr. De Palma, babe.
So this movie was directed by Brian De Palma, and if you're unfamiliar with Brian De Palma, you are absolutely not unfamiliar with Brian De Palma's work. He is considered one of the kings of what is called the new Hollywood class of directors.
Okay.
That includes Scorsese, that era of directors, and he is responsible before Mission Impossible, and since Mission Impossible, other things, but before Mission Impossible, for many, many thrillers that you already know and love. He directed Carrie in 1976.
Oh, wow.
He directed Dress to Kill, which has autobiographical stories from his youth in it, which I find fascinating when you find out which ones those are. He directed Scarface, little film you may have heard of, little friend you may have heard of called Scarface. He directed The Untouchables in 1987. He directed Carlito's Way in 1993, and of course many, many more movies. So he is truly a gifted director for psychological thrillers, which when he brings that to bear for Mission Impossible, I think works terribly well. Next up is our star, Mr. Tom Cruise.
Of course, Tom Cruise. Let's get to Mr. Tom Cruise here. Gosh darn, I'm having a devil of a time. All the technology's going south on me. It's crazy. That's more Mr. De Palma.
That's more
That's what Mr. Palma looks like today.
That's Mr.
Hi, Brian.
Tom Cruise is Hi, Brian. Robin, they're on a first name basis. Tom Cruise got this film made. He was a fan of the original show, and who wasn't? It is a little bit dated, I think. Rob and I watched it when we were kids, when reruns and stuff. But it was such a tight, awesome weekly installment. And he wanted to adapt it for the big screen for Paramount Pictures, who owned the rights. It was Cruise's first producer credit as well. George Clooney was offered the part of Ethan Hunt, but he turned it down due to work in One Fine Day. Bruce Willis,
In One Fine Day,
John Travolta, Nicolas
Not
Cage,
$1 billion franchise, by the way.
Ralph Fiennes, and Mel Gibson were later considered for the part before Tom Cruise got the role. So if I'm following this right, he wanted to get it done. It was a producer, and they were casting other people for the part?
Yes.
That's the part my brain is caught on.
Yeah.
But it kind of makes sense in a way, right? Because one thing that Tom Cruise has done right his entire career is quite early on, he teams up with Kathleen Kennedy. And this is his first producer credit. So it is possible that, Kathleen Kennedy had been around the block a few times by then too, as had Tom Cruise. And maybe they were like, all right, you know what? You know how it goes. Every time you want a role, you show up for a role. Val Kilmer's there. Whoever is there. There are other people there. We're going to have to do the same thing, but it's fine. You're going to get it. It's in the bag, Tommy. No big deal. And so they go through all of that because that's the way that the studio heads and the people spending money are okay with it. And then they're like, well, geez, Tom Cruise is already there, and he's Tom freaking Cruise. Let's just cast him. And then they feel great because they feel like it's their idea.
And here is the best part, you guys. The absolute best part is Tom Cruise deferred his $20 million fee for a percentage of the box office takings. And as we've already covered, he's got more money than George Lucas selling Star Wars toys. It's just an enormous amount of money.
I'd say that worked out for him.
Yeah, it worked out pretty well. And I'm going to guess go ahead, Robbie.
I want to know how that conversation goes, though. Tom Cruise, hey, I'll add my clout to this. I loved this TV series. Let's get it. Let's produce it. Let's go. I'm all in. Great. Let's cast George Clooney. Like how does that how does that conversation
I mean,
go?
you look at it, and Tom Cruise perhaps is a tiny bit young for the part. He looks like a little kid around this cast of people. Even Emilio Estevez is a similar age group. He's just always looked young. He still does not look his age at all, even though he's 62 now. So that could have been part of it, but, as A&I's rewatch, he's Tom Cruise and he's popcorn central, and it worked out great.
Yeah. And I mean, who knows? It also could be like him giving back, him deferring his $20 million fee also could have been working the Hollywood system and taking a bet, because one thing that he knew that is very clearly true, he and Kathleen Kennedy knew at the time, was like, cool, we can't pull Mission Impossible from the 60s into the future. That's not going to work. This is not the way the world works anymore. This is not the way spying works anymore. but we can take the framework of that and turn it on its head, which is why you have Phelps in there in the beginning. He's the only named character from the series who joins, and he's a wholly different character.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of works to set everything on its head. So if they were like, sure, you want to do the dog and pony show for this first Mission Impossible, great. And now they own so much of it. Both of them own so much of it. Like,
They're made. And speaking of Mr. Phelps, Rob, tell us about Jon Voight.
I mean, Jon Voight, I feel like if I have to give you Jon Voight's resume, you're listening to the wrong podcast, right?
Exactly right.
I don't know how you accidentally clicked play on this, but and listen, we want as many listeners as we can, but I mean, I don't know, maybe go find a Pokemon podcast or something. Maybe that'll be more your speed. Jon Voight, listen, all you got to say is Midnight Cowboy Deliverance, okay? And then 300 things since then, okay?
Oh, for
Jon
Deliverance,
Voight is
yeah, totally.
Oh, and listen, just on top of everything else, also sired Angelina Jolie. So
Yep.
thanks, John. We're all big fans, buddy. Big fans. So they decide to cast a guy with Jon Voight's, Hollywood clout and weightiness because, and we've already said, spoiler alert, but Jim Phelps is the bad guy, right? Jim Phelps turns on the rest of the IMF team. And they figure we cast Voight, a very likable character, and he's extremely likable through the whole first part of the movie. I mean, he is the father figure, he is the brother, he is everybody's pal, the husband, exactly right. And then he turns on everybody, and they thought we cast Voight and we name him Jim Phelps, the only name from the original series. Maybe people won't catch on that he's the bad guy.
I forgot about the history of the show and that the Phelps was the hero, so that of course makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
So a lot of people go into this not expecting Voight to be the heel at all. That works out great.
And I didn't want to talk about it when we were in the beginning here, but now that you've made that spoiler that he's the bad guy, I will say I also think this is why such high-powered talent was in the IMF group, right? This is why Emilio Estevez is there, because you're like, oh, cool, Emilio Estevez, I love him. This is going to be a great movie. Oh, Kristen Scott Thomas, what? Of course, it's going to be great.
Yeah.
She's a terrific, isn't she, for an Oscar? Like all
And
that
then-
happens.
And then they kill them all off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why.
And none of us see at the moment. We didn't see it on the rewatch either, even though we knew what was going to happen. None of us recognized the one face other than the one on the poster, Tom Cruise, of course. We know he's not going to get blown up. The only one who survives that is Jon Voight. And we never wonder why. Why all these high-powered actors, high-powered talent, except for him, don't make it out of the first 10 minutes.
As an author, I should have been more knowledgeable of that, but now I'm like, it's kind of weird they brought Emilio Estevez and whacked him. Now it all makes sense. Bring in the guy pretending to be the other guy from the other thing, who's the good guy, and now he's the bad guy. You don't see that coming. And of course, you know, who kills Emilio Estevez, for F's sakes?
Especially since he's such
He
a
didn't
great
even die in
role.
Young Guns, for God's sakes.
And
he
he's
was
such
like,
a great character in this.
did he die
I
in Young
wonder-
Guns?
What's that?
Did he die in Young Guns? He lived?
He lives to be Brushy Bill at the end.
Okay,
So I'm just saying, no, he survived. And I wonder if the fact that they all got to work with somebody like Jon Voight actually helped them sign on to be in only 10 minutes of this movie. You know
That's
what
a
I mean?
that's a great
I'm
point.
sure it didn't hurt.
Yep.
They did consider Al Pacino, Michael Douglas, Robert Redford,
Yep.
any of them who would be good, but then, Robert Redford couldn't pull this off as Jim Phelps and then come back in the MCU and do exactly the same thing. So thank goodness they didn't cast Robert Redford in this movie. I'm just saying.
Well, and to be fair, I mean that's good for sequel purposes too. But any of those actors also would have had this same like, oh, this is going to be fine. He's not the bad guy, So that's pretty interesting. Sean Dyer in the chat room says a very good point. He says, well, if they were just nobody extras that died immediately, the reveal would have been pretty obvious at the beginning.
Wouldn't care.
Which is a really good
Wouldn't care.
point. Yeah, it's just so deftly done, and that's a signature of De Palma's work. Is he's so good with the psychology behind the screwing with you in a thriller.
All right, and that brings us now to the coolest part of the whole thing. Well, there's Jon Voight today.
I think A and I will just step aside for the next 15 minutes. Go ahead, Scott.
Let's talk about Ving Rhames. First of all, look at the white coat, the maroon.
Rhames.
What's that?
I'm pointing to Ving Rhames.
Oh, yes, Flame Rings. The white coat, the maroon turtleneck, the costuming is completely on point.
So
he is,
cool.
Of course, Tom Cruise is basically walking around in a tux half the time. But Ving Rhames, makes this look good. And he just,
easy.
that's the thing. He looked so effortless in this. And the producers cast him as Luther because they felt he was the opposite of what a hacker normally looks like, which is brilliant because they made Emilio Estevez look like what a hacker looks like. And then they turn around and bring in this suave AF MF. Tom Cruise and Ving Rhames are the only actors who appear in every single Mission Impossible film. He was born Irving Rhames. He was given the nickname Ving by his roommate at, State University of New York
at Purchase.
His roommate, another nobody actor who went to acting school and never made anything. So like Stan Tucci. Oh wait, Stanley.
Yeah, I wonder.
Stanley Tucci.
Wonder whatever happened to that guy.
Rhames spent 2 years in the acting program at SUNY before transferring and graduating from Juilliard. And of course, is a huge part of possibly my favorite movie next to Aliens. Behind Aliens is Pulp Fiction. So just a brilliant guy, and there he's in Pulp Fiction, and he's aging well too. Him and Tom Cruise both.
Yeah.
The thing about Ving, he's this big, muscular dude, right? He can get away with playing the heavy and the physical character. Does he get into a single physical confrontation in this movie?
No.
There's not one, right? Not one. And that is freaking great.
Yeah.
That is awesome. I love it.
And if you go, that seems to be sort of a trademark. If you go back to Pulp Fiction, he gets the crap kicked out of him twice, but he never brings his big, thick physicality to bear to whoop up on someone else. So that's part of his gestalt.
But here's the thing, you both did it. So he was also considered for Stephen King's The Green Mile for the role that went to Michael Clark Duncan. Michael Clark Duncan is no longer with us, but he was well above 6'3". I think he was 6'5", maybe?
Okay.
He was a giant man. Ving Rhames, that human being on the screen right now, is 6 feet tall and 200 pounds. He's just huge with his personality, and he's strong. He might be a little more now than 200 pounds, but he's not a terribly huge human being. Okay. He's just this huge, powerful person.
And the fact that Tom Cruise is 4'4" tall, that probably helps.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
And then we get to our first supporting character, I guess you would say. And this actress has a very fascinating story. Tell us about her.
So this is Emmanuelle Bear, I think is how you say her last name. And she was an actress in France and before being cast in international movies. What I find fascinating about her is she was in this giant powerhouse of a movie, and not only this movie, and two interesting side points about that. She started in France as an actor, and she, in the 80s, was an adult film actress. And if you care to, you can still find those movies. Because, of course, back in the 80s, you had to go to a theater.
I'll be back in about 48 seconds.
But, of course, it's France, right? And France is less puritanical than other countries, like maybe my country. And so then she, she's absolutely gorgeous. She's not untalented, and she tries out for mainstream movies and get cast and becomes part of the mainstream movie making in France. And then she gets this movie. And then, the other interesting part is it seems like her fame and acting and everything was sort of a rock skip on a river or a pond, because she eventually just leaves acting, and now she's an activist in I think she lives in Belgium now, but whatever. But it's weird to have I might examine acting for a while, end up in a blockbuster movie that made $1 billion in the franchise with Tom Cruise.
Perhaps she also gave up her fee to take a small percentage of the box office.
Maybe she did. Yeah, maybe she did.
Now owns Latvia. That's the way that goes.
But it's not a thing we see a lot, and especially this is her today, and it's I kind of love that, and we see a few, the mores in other countries are different than the ones here. We have a couple of actors who have transitioned from adult movies, but really not too many. So that was kind of interesting.
Now we get into one of my favorite action movie actors, Jean Renault. Rob, take it away.
Or even Jean Renault.
Renault. I'm American. What do you want?
Since we're in the Parlez-vous Français portion of our program today, so Jean Renault comes in. He's one of the guys who's been disavowed, and he also, like Emmanuelle Bear, got his start in French cinema. As far as I know, None of it was pornography, but hey, again,
it was not.
as A said, it's France, so it's entirely possible, right? So, and he's in a lot of excellent movies and just French movies. He's not really known outside of the continent. And then La Femme Nikita, and he just explodes, and it is such a good movie. And the cool thing about Jean Renault is that I think the best compliment you can give to an actor is that he seems like he's in the moment, right? I mean, the actor knows what's coming next. He even knows the words are going to be said, right? But the character has to act like this is happening for the first time, and how would I react? And Jean Renault just has this natural personality thing to him that he can react to what other people are saying. And whether it's, he throws a lot of comedy in with his stuff. We've seen more of that recently. We didn't really see a lot of it in Mission Impossible. But there's just, there's that moment where Tom Cruise is like, he's got, the disc, and he keeps doing the hand thing, and he's hiding it, and it's in my pocket, and where is it? And it's over there, and she's got it, he's got it, where is it? And he just stands there for like 3 minutes watching Tom Cruise. He doesn't say a word, and yet everything's written on his face, and you can see the gears going like, well, that son of a bitch tricked me. Damn it. Merde. And he does speak 5 languages, and he's just, I don't know. You could put Jean Renault in just about anything, and I think he'd be great, because he's pretty awesome.
I think that's a lovely, lovely kind of encapsulation of why he's so magic, especially in this role. But we've had a couple of mentions in the chat room. Of course, he comes to an international audience with La Femme Nikita, but really makes his rocks with The Professional.
Yeah, yeah.
And
that's a great point.
Especially is one of those, what you're talking about is, if you're acting, No Women, No Kids is a huge part of that. And guess what? His first international blockbuster, he works against a kid.
a female kid.
And he does great, right?
You throw a dog in there, and he's breaking every freaking rule, all right?
And it was so magic because of what you pointed out, Rob, that I really think he acts by not acting. He acts by trying to actively listen for the first time ever to these words he already knows, and respond as he would in that room with whatever temperature is, and whatever he had to eat for lunch that day, he's going to react that way. So you see that a lot, and I think that comes out in his comedy too. Like sometimes, I forget which movie it is, but I think it might be The Professional. I think he could, at one point is completely irrelevant to the plot, but he has a little gas and he's still talking, but he's like and that's real. Like, we do that. And I think that makes him a really lovely, lovely character actor and such a huge talent. Some of us do that
more often than others. How's that little tiny room with no ventilation going? I'm just saying.
Rob, don't insinuate I have bodily gas. Don't insinuate this at all.
I don't think I have to insinuate anything.
And that does it for our cast. We're going to go over a couple other images here. Got some other things to talk about. Is that right,
I do want to say, can you call up the MI5? There are a couple. We've talked about them already. But there are a couple of really high-powered, very talented actors who lend themselves to this movie. 2 of them are in the first 10 minutes, and this is the third. This is Vanessa Redgrave, and she plays Max. And we'll talk more about her role, but she's an international arms dealer. And Ethan Hunt uses Max to expose the mole at Langley, back at the CIA, and has to do it very deftly because she is a hugely powerful human being in this scenario. And she's Vanessa Redgrave. She's gorgeous and lovely and talented. So she, of course, now she's in her mid-80s. She's maybe retired from acting, from a storied acting family. The Redgraves are a storied acting family, but she's very much that class of Helen Mirren, Judi Dench, who can also kind of look. Yes, they're very proper English ladies, but they can also, not take themselves too seriously.
They've got a
and
death
do something
stare.
Great.
They've got both of those ladies have an absolute stone cold death stare, and it sells really well.
And they have gravitas. I mean, that moment she appears on the screen, Max was originally written for a man, right? And so Vanessa Redgrave pops up, and you've been expecting Max. You've been expecting a man the entire time, and boom, it's Vanessa Redgrave. And I'll tell you, if not for Emilio Estevez and Jack Harmon, Max and Vanessa Redgrave would have been my favorite thing about this movie.
Exactly,
She's fantastic. So I'm so glad you brought her up.
Yeah. I didn't want to miss it, but they're so brief, those 3 roles. Emilio Estevez, Kristen Scott Thomas, who is on screen right now, you can't see Robbie, and Vanessa Redgrave are really lent an enormous amount of talent and are the epitome of there are no small roles, there are only small actors in this movie. They take tiny roles and make the movie so much better. And we are going to move on to sort of talk in general. So I want to say, like, one of the reasons this movie works for me personally is it is all popcorn, no filler.
Yeah.
There's no gravitas here. There's nothing serious here, but each popcorn is the perfect kernel of popcorn is the thing about it, right? And you get that by getting Vanessa Redgrave to take this very, very important and yet smaller part than she's used to. You get that by having Emilio Estevez be like, sure, I'll be uncredited. Just make sure I die spectacularly.
Do you guys, do we have
thing.
any information on how does someone who's a star like Emilio Estevez get into this and go uncredited?
All right, let me dive into that.
Okay,
so,
Robbie.
As A intimated earlier, it was on purpose. And a couple things. Probably one thing, Tom Cruise not taking $20 million and instead taking a cut at the end gives them extra money to pay extra money to bigger names. So that's probably how you get Kristen Scott Thomas and Vanessa Redgrave and Emilio Estevez. Now, remember, this is back in the mid-'90s, so we don't have instant internet anything, right? They can sneak somebody onto a film set and most times get them the hell out of there before anybody knows who it is. Today, you just can't do that. There's cameras everywhere, right? So the idea was, let's not even put his name in the credits. And then when he pops up in the first couple of scenes, people will be like, that's frickin' Emilio Estevez right there. That's you know, hello. That's Gordon Bombay.
It's a nice Easter egg,
we're,
right?
We're rolling, man. And then the idea is, let's get somebody really recognizable. And then when he dies, people are going to know, okay, this is serious. Because this movie starts, if you didn't know anything about this movie, you think this movie is going to be about that team of people and figuring out what's going on and working together the same way the show was. And then De Palma turns everything on its head by killing off the first IMF team. And they kind of had that same thing when Jon Voight dies, quote unquote. But then, of course, he comes back later in the movie. It turns out he didn't die. So throwing somebody like Emilio Estevez and letting him be the first dead guy, letting him be so likable that everybody wanted to see more of him in this movie, and then having him get, you know, like skewered by the top of an elevator. That's pretty freaking gruesome.
It's
right?
pretty gruesome.
And we don't see a drop of blood, and yet we're all like cringing. And they were like, okay, this might be something serious that's going on here. And because when it comes down to it, it's a movie about another movie, right? Getting the knock list and getting all the names becomes a movie where somebody's out hunting people on the knock list, right? I mean, this is the preamble for what another movie could be, and yet it's the movie. And so you've got to step up that thought that anybody could die at any minute, and it happens in the first 10 minutes, thanks to Emilio Estevez and him, nobody knowing he was in this movie.
And to your point earlier, Robbie, like if they're going to sneak him in 1996, the vast majority of his work is in a elevator shaft. Or in a small confined room, or in a van.
Everything's interiors. I mean, it's
you can do that anywhere.
Right. And who knows if they shot on location, which I believe they at least shot some of it on location. He's either in a studio or he's somewhere in Europe, and you know, Europeans don't care what us Americans are.
We have
doing
a comment
most of the time,
from David Lamb in the chat room. MI franchise had a huge influence on other movie series, notably James Bond. That's arguable. James Bond kind of set the stage and invented the style of movie. But Jason Bourne and Salt, too, definitely a lot of elements of those that you see from Mission Impossible in those things. One thing that I
think
found,
David's probably talking about how the James Bond took it at this point, takes
ramped
a
it up.
left turn and it becomes less campy, less about the gadgets, and which eventually leads to Daniel Craig's James Bond, which
you get
one of the best
Bond after Mission Impossible becomes much more of a sympathetic character. Sean Connery is, well, we won't go along with this, but Sean Connery is exactly the Bond from the books. If you've read a James Bond book,
Except
he is a psychopath, and absolutely kills anyone, has no remorse whatsoever. So you go from Sean Connery, then you get Roger Moore, a little campy, then this influence, and it moves into Daniel Craig, who's outstanding. But this is good.
But also to this point exactly, like we also need the Bond franchise to grow with us as a society, and this helps do that. This helps Daniel Craig become again a psychopath, and the Bond he's supposed to be after the freewheeling 60s where it's all about the sex and the martinis, and the 70s where it's all about the sex and the martinis, and the 80s where it sort of gets a little less about the sex and a little less about the
Still
martinis.
the martinis,
Yeah.
but not as much sex.
The
Right.
Vespers anyway, yeah.
Getting back to Mission Impossible, here's a fact that A and Rob dug up that I was unaware of. This reminds me a lot of my fascination with the first Saw movie, where if you watch Saw the first time and you're telling a buddy about it, you're like, oh my God, it's so gory. There's so much blood and guts in this movie. It's incredible and horrifying. You go back and rewatch it. There's almost no blood and guts in Saw. There's a lot of the scenes like this one scene, they pulled out this guy's intestines and looking for he was nuts. It's like, that's all done in shadow in Saw. I had to go back and rewatch it. It did not happen. I remember it.
Yep.
In Mission Impossible, does not feature any shootouts or gunfights. Ethan Hunt never even fires a gun in the first film.
Once.
Only 5 gunshots occur throughout the entire movie. That is something I did not know.
I will go
and
back.
one of them is Jim Phelps pretending to shoot himself. So one of them's not even a real shot at someone else. Yeah.
And I'll go back to what I said at the top of the general discussion here. Like, this is a popcorn movie with absolutely perfect popcorn and no substance, right? There's not a message about spy culture. There's not a message about international warfare. There's not a message about guns. There's not a message about anything. There's not a message about this is how you treat men. This is how you treat women. This is how you treat couples. None of that. It's just all perfect popcorn. And this is one of those things. If it gets too gratuitously violent, it's a little less perfect. If it gets too gratuitously bloody, same thing.
Yeah.
That has not carried on in the rest of the billion-dollar franchise.
At all, in any of those things I said. Not one of those things I said. Except for maybe the message. We might not still have a message.
Yeah, well, there's still not much of a message.
No,
Excellent
no.
point. Let's credit Brian De Palma, though, because I want to talk about Brian De Palma
Okay.
for a minute. Because, his milieu is psychology, right? It's like, how do I show people on a screen what's going on inside people's heads? Right? How do I do that? And he is just, I don't know, I love Brian De Palma movies.
Me too.
I can barely think of a Brian De Palma movie that I wouldn't watch, right? And he's just on top of everything else. So, right, like he's all about the psychology. And so the idea of a gunfight to him doesn't make any sense. Because how do I get inside somebody's head when someone's firing at them very quickly, right? Because all he can do is run. That's instinct. That's not thought. And he just uses all these moments. He stays on a close-up a half second longer. He shoots everything from these weird like ceiling angles. It's like one random shot of Ethan reaching up and grabbing something off a top shelf. He had to reset for an entirely different camera to shoot that one shot. Why do we need to see Ethan reaching up and grabbing something off the top shelf from the aspect of the top shelf? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. It's unnecessary, and yet it's beautiful. It's well done. It's so well edited together. And I give Brian De Palma just a huge amount of credit for that, because he wants to see film as art, and he makes sure that in a billion-dollar franchise, there can still be art involved in that. And that's what he does.
I'm so glad you mentioned, because I am completely with you. We should start a fan club for Brian De Palma. I think the work that he does.
I guarantee there's some out there already.
I know,
Yeah.
but we
I
should
think
start
we're
ours
good.
because we're smarter than everybody, obviously.
Wow.
But
You make an excellent point.
I agree with you. Here's my thing. I completely agree. There is no point, no reason, no rationale for the point of view when Ethan, we see this also a lot on the trains where they do this very long shot of walking, or this very long, I have to get all the way there. And we see the camera pan there before Ethan moves. We see all of that. But then we see from the point of view of the shelf, and I agree there's zero reason that needs to happen for the story that is being told. But for the viewers at home, that makes Ethan and us isolated together. That's what that does. It gets Ethan into our heads, right? It's like, this is what Ethan is seeing. And he does that so subtly and so often with, like you said, with like 1 second delays. And you even see that early back in his very early stuff in Carrie. Carrie doesn't become Carrie for like 5 seconds after the blood, after the pig blood. It's just this kid
Oh yeah, this
who's been
slow
so
motion.
bullied and is standing there like the literal last moment she's the same person. And I won't dwell too much on this, but he holds
But
that
then
just
her eyes blast
Right.
open with all that.
And that's all De Palma, right? Like
her
that.
eyes, and boom, that's De Palma.
And
That's-
you
he's
are,
so
and we're
good at it.
all sitting there like, oh, somebody do something for just 1 second too long before
Makes
her
you
eyes
nervous.
open and everything
That's
changes.
great.
Yeah.
And the best part is De Palma was actually kind of falling out. He hadn't had a big money maker in a few years. I guarantee if he had been going along, there's no way he would have signed on to do this movie. I don't care who's in it.
Yeah.
I don't
It does
care.
seem
This
out
is
of his milieu.
Yeah. Some TV remake? What? But De Palma's kind of like, well, I really could remind people I'm an excellent director and I like money. So if we make a big blockbuster hit, it could pay me for a while to go back to doing the smaller scale stuff that I like to do. And it's
he's-
De Palma that convinces Cruise, let's go to Prague. Right? I mean, this is right after communism falls, right? I mean,
Oh, that's
Prague
right.
has been a communist stronghold of the USSR forever. Nobody's ever shot in a movie inside Prague unless it was done by the Soviet film department. So let's do something that nobody's ever seen before. And they shoot in Prague, and it's just gorgeous. It's fantastic. And it was a perfect setting, and it isolates the entire team, and that isolates Ethan Hunt once everybody else is gone. It's just
100%,
brilliant.
yeah.
It's just brilliant.
Yeah. He's super talented, and it's a terrific meeting of the minds, right? So Cruise is already Tom Cruise at this point, but he's not Tom Cruise a director or a producer at this point.
Producer, right.
Even though he's got Kathleen Kennedy, even though they've got all that going on, it's still nascent. It's still new. Brian De Palma is not yet who he is today, but he's clearly in the 1990s. He's Brian De Palma, right? So that was a terrific meeting of like, I see what you're trying to do. I also, because they were turning everything on their heads. Mission Impossible was a staid 60s good guy TV series.
Yeah.
And they're turning it all on its head. Like, yeah, we're going to ruin all
And
that. And
since-
it does so well because they work together about making something new and weird.
Since the star was the actor, was the producer, was the guy who hired the director, they could make an awful lot of. Who was the guy who said, "Keep my $20 million"? They pretty much Paramount just said, "All right, do whatever the hell you want."
Right.
And
We
he
know
said,
we're going to
"Hey,
make our money
we're-
back. It's going to be fine.
We're going to Prague. We're good.
And speaking of money, this is another tidbit to draw. Now, you guys in the computer world may know this, but I'd forgotten all about this. Apple Computers paid $15 million to have their computers in the movie. That is a huge percentage of the whole budget of the movie.
Yeah.
The money was also for print and TV ads, and Apple also launched an online game related to the movie. The company claimed that the 1996 agreement, the movie that came out in 1998, was the first partnership from 96, the first
Yeah, it came out in
partnership
96.
between a studio and a major high-tech firm to promote a movie. So this is something another groundbreaking thing about
Yep.
this movie. This is one of the first movies with a high-tech computer product placement paid to be in the movie.
And, you know, it's funny because watching it now, we watched it, Friday night, date night, maybe?
Yep.
Yeah, we watched it last night. Yeah. And some of the things, they are dated, right? Like, you can't help this, right? If you see a phone, if you see him type into the computer things, all of that is dated now because it was
Like
sort
the chat room was, was
Oh,
more
my
like
God.
like a Usenet server room or something.
We're gonna get to. We got a question from Lonely Bob. Let's roll into the question from Lonely Bob.
Okay,
this is
sure.
good. Lonely Bob asks, which aspect of the film doesn't age well? He hasn't watched it in a while, but he remembers it was very good. Rob, lead off. We'll all talk about what is not aged well in this movie.
Well, can I go right there, or do
Yeah.
you want to
Yeah.
talk about the technology
No,
side?
go ahead. Chat
Yeah,
room's
it's,
fine. Whatever you want.
It's really interesting. The best part is he has so he goes onto this Usenet. He's trying to find this character Max, right? Because he knows if I can hook up with Max, Max will lead me to whoever the mole is in the IMF, right? And so he figures out that Job 314 is actually Job 314 from the Bible. And so he goes into all these very distinct little chat rooms. And the best part is he has to find a different Job 314 Usenet group for every different language that he speaks, so he can type the same message in there because he doesn't know which one will actually get to max, right? And so he's spending like 6 hours typing in these little Usenet groups and sending emails only via Usenet. And, you know, he doesn't have to sign into Job's account or anything. He just pretends to be Job and everybody believes him like, you know, he's some Nigerian princess with like $15 billion. Oh, by the way, I have to get back to her. Remind me to do that later. Okay?
I do know this too, though. In the original film, which I do not remember, of course, because I'm old, but watching it last night, when he does that, when he discovers Job 314 is really Job 314, he goes to, opens a window that says Internet Access. And back in the day, it said Usenet. But they have changed that because they were like, "Oh Lord, we can. That's an easy digital fix, and we can't have any of that." Which I didn't know until when it became a digital thing. They changed that to Internet Access, physically changed, or that what we see is Internet Access instead of Usenet because it's so jarring now to see Usenet colon.
Let's also point out he doesn't just Google search what the phrase Job 314 is. He actually goes physically pulls out a Bible and has to know which chapter Job is. So all of us little Catholics are very happy with him at that point. We know where Job is in the Bible. I'm just saying.
This little Catholic never, not even last night after I knew how the movie ended, connected him going to a physical Bible, which is an important plot point for him figuring out who the mole is.
Right.
Never connected it
If
until just this second.
Yeah.
That's
if he could have just Googled what Job 314 was,
we've been no good.
Then he never would have known Phelps was the bad
That's
guy.
one of the very weird plot holes in this movie. And of course, we watched a couple times, and it stands up very well. It's a popcorn movie. You don't watch for plot holes, but there are a couple of very interesting plot holes. Like super spy John Voight carries a Bible with him from Chicago to Prague. That's a little bit much. They rely on heavily. The one that I want to talk about though is that they never really address in the movie, but it drives me batty, is the Jean Renault character, Jean Renault character who is in on the heist from Square One. He is the one who kills the people. He's involved in it, and then Tom Cruise randomly picks him out of nowhere when Tom Cruise wasn't even supposed to survive that opening scene, and picks him, and Renault is just like down pretending to like totally be with the whole program. It's a weird flashback. Go ahead, Rob. What I miss?
You missed a line.
Okay.
Claire brought Franz in.
Yeah.
Claire is the
That's
one
what
who
I
she
missed.
apologizes later after he goes kind of nutso cuckoo and says, "I'm sorry, I never should have suggested him." So,
Which is
That
also
explains
an
everything.
interesting
That explains
deflection
everything.
because
So,
I genuinely
never
believe,
mind.
Yeah, and I genuinely believe that Claire is sort of a supporting protagonist, not a supporting antagonist, even though she's married to the antagonist. I think she's actually a protagonist, and so this is another way. She's like, so she says, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I brought in Krieger, but not. Oh, I'm so sorry. I married the asshole." Like she doesn't do that part.
The original script, however, just so you know, showed an affair scene between Tom Cruise. That's the kiss that we see that made the trailer, but not the movie. So they were actually having an active affair. And it was Claire going after Ethan Hunt because they knew. So she's having an affair, pretending to love Ethan Hunt when actually trying to betray him. And second, she is the one, according to the original script, that did blow up the car and kill their teammate. So
good.
Yeah.
Maybe they
edit
explains
that out to make her more sympathetic.
But that is all in Ethan Hunt's head. We never find out if John Voight's character actually blew up the car or Claire blew up the car. It's just Ethan walking through the process in his noggin. It could have been her. We don't know.
So for you guys, we have a little bit of time. We're doing really well time-wise.
Yeah, go ahead.
For you guys as screenwriters, I have a question. If the original script has Claire as a sort of supporting antagonist, and of course we all saw, you can still watch it today, the trailer where Claire and Ethan smooch, but that never shows up in the movie. How do you guys feel about that? Like, how does your script evolve? Has in some of your work together, has your script evolved where like this is very clearly like this is comic relief and they become a pivotal character, or they become? Does that happen as you work through it?
Yes. absolutely.
Rob, tell about mall pigs and the evolution if you want to.
So the film that we wrote that we are currently in, I don't know, development, I guess the stage we could call it, right?
Yeah.
So it started out with a number of characters. We have switched the main character from one brother to another brother. There was one supporting character that was mostly there for comic relief, right? To mess with the other mall pig, who's kind of the goofy one.
Right.
That has now become a main character, and part of the whole thing. Her entire character developed out of the need to do some things, and we're just like, well, why don't we have Gladys do that? That makes sense to make it work. So yeah, that happens, and the opposite can also happen, right? You take somebody like Claire, and it might be producers meetings, it might be writers meetings, it might be.
It also can be their performance on screen. There's so many instances in movies where okay, we're bringing this bit character, and like, holy crap, we did not think this actor or this actress was going to do this. Yeah, and the producers and the directors look at it and be like, we've got to get more of that on screen because that's going to put butts in the seats and is going to sell sugar. That's what it is.
Well, listen, one of the first movies we did on StorySmack was Caddyshack.
Yep.
And, the producers at one point said, listen, you got Bill Murray and you've got Chevy Chase, and you don't have them in any freaking scenes together. Fix that, right? So sometimes you're right, Scott. Sometimes it's the performance, or sometimes it's, especially when you start thinking, well, if this becomes a franchise, we really want that character to live. Now, why no one had that meeting about frickin' Emilio Estevez is beyond me, because he would have been great in MI5. I'm just saying. And to bring in Simon Pegg, and it could have been frickin' Emilio Estevez.
And here's the crazy part about that. Like, we never see Emilio Estevez die. We understand that he died. We understand that he gets into the whatever, but we never see dripping blood.
Multiple impales.
We never see dripping blood in the elevator. We never see anything. And this movie is full of popcorn, as I've mentioned several times. He could have come back as Simon Pegg's character anyway.
That feels like a Joss Whedon excuse, is what that sounds like to
okay,
me.
Fair. Okay, fair.
But wait, one thing, Rob and I have we grew up together and we role played in D&D and Champions and all those things, and that is where we learned a lot of our storytelling chops, is watching the physical reaction of people sitting across the table when we do the big reveal. And one of the rules that was always in my games when I was a game master or a dungeon master was dead equals dead, but if you don't see the body, odds are, and nobody ever sees the body of Emilio Estevez. So I would love to see Mission Impossible 7. They bring his ass back. That would be fantastic.
And I'm not saying that would work in any other venue. But hear me out, Robbie. Hear me out, you guys at home.
Okay.
Everything about this movie, the reason it works, the reason there's a helicopter in a tunnel, what? The reason all that happens is because... happens on a whim especially, is because it's all popcorn, no gravitas, right? So this is the one chance you get to get away with not a parody, not a Simon Pegg, Nick Frost movie, not that kind of movie. The one way you get away with it is there's no message, it's all just popcorn. And we'd be like, oh yeah, no, he flattened himself, or something, and he comes back, and then he gets killed anyway.
The flattened himself thing. All right. So, he's about to take a giant metal pole right in the face. So unless he learned some deep-throating skills from Emmanuel Barrett or something, I don't know how you get past that. And the helicopter thing, inspired by this movie, a Brazilian helicopter guy, flyer, pilot, I know there's a word for that.
Yep.
How many shots have I taken? Actually flew through a train tunnel just to prove that it could be done. So I'm just saying. On
a whim, you don't fly through a tunnel that has a train in it on a helicopter. You spend a lot of time, you get a lot of insurance, and you do it that way. But yeah, it's such a fun thing because we've talked about this a little bit on StorySmack. Like, I'm much more willing to kind of roll with punches because I am not a writer. I don't have to think it through, right? So if it works for me, it just works for me. And on the rewatch, it worked for both of us in different ways. And today we were talking about, like, why on earth are you guys not mad about it?
Yeah. Here are some people it did not work for. Fans of the television series, including actors, Peter Graves, Martin Landau, right?
Yeah, 100%.
These guys, the director, Reza Babai, right? Just did not like this movie. And, it was Peter Graves played Jim Phelps in the television series. And he was just pissed that the only guy that gets named and essentially brought in from the TV series is the bad guy. Can't do that. Just can't do that. I honestly just wish they would have named him anything other than Jim Phelps. Honestly. And Martin Landau, there was script ideas at the beginning to bring them in as supporting characters, at least as cameos.
Right.
And once they saw what was happening, they all said no.
Really?
And I totally get that.
Out. That's
I
crazy.
totally get that. And here's the crazy thing. I'm 100% with them when they look at the script in 1995 for what becomes MI1. Sitting here in 2021, they were right. The producers of this movie, the director, they were all right.
Yeah.
They did the right thing. They said, like, cool, all these mores, all this, it can't transmit. And unlike Pirates of the Caribbean, which legit has no backstory in cinema, it's a ride. Like, they can make up anything they want. Mission Impossible did exactly the same thing, but they had to account for the fact that they're a spy organization and Mission Impossible, the series, exists. And they did it in a unfriendly way. I'll say very generously, an unfriendly way to the original series, but they didn't denigrate the original series. And I get Peter Graves' complaint. I do. Right. But now that it's a $1 billion franchise, they were right.
And you get what they're doing. People come in with an expectation who knew the series, and you give them that expectation for 10 minutes, right? The IMF team, and everybody has their thing. This is exactly like TV series. Then you freaking kill every damn one of them. And now we're on a roller coaster ride, baby. Let's see where this goes.
Let's we'll finish with one point from very other little bits of trivia about the show. I thought this was impressive. People bag on Tom Cruise all the time. People have reasons to bag on Tom Cruise, other than him being a very smart Hollywood brain, knowing the right movies to pick, the right things involved, knowing when to give up $20 million because he knows he's onto something. The trick with a disappearing CD that Ethan Hunt does to fool Franz Krieger is not a camera trick or any kind of visual effect. Tom Cruise actually learned the genuine sleight of hand to do that and make that very interesting. I assume when I watch it, I'm assuming that's cuts, there's some special coat, there's something, but he just learned the magic trick.
And two things on that. One, Jean Renault, standing right there, also didn't realize that was going to be a genuine sleight of hand trick. I mean, he knew that it was going to disappear. He knew the script, but he didn't know that that was going to be a thing that Tom Cruise learned to do.
And we'll take care of that in post.
And two, to your point, absolutely, the whole film came in on time and on budget. Because Tom Cruise learned to do all those stunts himself, which he does to this day.
Still.
And there is no...
Still does. It's amazing.
Here, if you guys are super unfamiliar with Hollywood but love movies, I will tell you the amount of risk to take your marquee actor and let him hang from the tallest building in the world is extraordinary. And the amount it would cost to ensure that is also extraordinary. And Tom Cruise sat down with those people at lunch and was like, here's what I've done, here's how I've trained, here's who I am, here's how my safety rig is going to look, and got it approved. And so in MI1, he's hanging from one of the tallest buildings in the world, and it's literally Tom Cruise, and that lasts through the entire series. Tom Cruise does his own stunts when he can because it's less expensive for him as a producer.
There's only one producer in the world that would let Tom Cruise do that.
It's Tom Cruise.
It's Tom Cruise.
So real quick, before we go to Rob's last point, and we'll finish up with A's last point, if you guys have not seen, go on YouTube and look for Tom Cruise Mission Impossible knife stunt and watch what this crazy, incredibly rich bastard does to sell something in a movie. It's straight up bonkers. He should be on Jackass. I can't believe he did that. Go watch it. It will change your opinion of the guy overnight. Go ahead, Robbie. What's your last point about the movie?
Well, the big thing that I liked about this movie was dun 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 dun.
It's great. It's so great.
I mean, just having the theme song, they had U2 remade it, right? But they used the original theme song, and that original, at the end of the opening scene, the burning wick going, past everybody's name. Whew, boy, talk about paying homage.
They did.
Even though they screw everything, 10 minutes in, but paying homage to the original. And that's just one of the best pieces of music written for, any television or film ever. It's just fantastic. So
Yeah.
love
Baby.
it. Absolutely love it.
Last point about the movie, and we'll finish up.
Is sort of twofold. One, I completely agree with you, Robbie, and I love that the only reason my 17-year-old niece understands what Mission Impossible is because of the movies, and that's the only legacy the series will have with new generations. I think that's value adding, because now you can see all that on, I don't know, Tubi or something. I don't know, but I also love just the whole popcorn. It holds up because it's all kind of fluff anyway, and it's just sort of fun fluff on a Friday night kind of thing. I love that the most. And you?
Oh, right. I already gave mine.
You already did. Sorry,
Yeah, I started this ball off.
So, Robbie, thank you so much. We're going to be back on December 11th discussing The Matrix, because there's a new Matrix in late December on the 22nd.
I know karate.
Well, okay, that was a very impressive Keanu impression.
I can't wait. I'm pretty sure the whole episode will be Rob doing his Keanu impression, and I'm very excited for that.
Thank you so much once again for joining us.
I only have a month to grow my hair out, though. I'll have to start working on it.
We're going to sign off. Thank you so much. We'll see you next month.
All right, and I'm
Bye, love
muting
you.
Rob. And Rob, you can jump off anytime. We've got a couple of hackers waiting to get in the Zoom room, so I'm leaving the Zoom open because I kind of want to see where this goes. We'll do this after we shut off the stream, but go ahead, Angel.
So that, as you know, was episode 76 of StorySmack. You can find Scott and I online. Scott is at Scott Sigler on Twitter or Instagram, and his Facebook page is facebook.com/Scott Sigler. I am at A Real Girl on Twitter and at a.real.girl. on Instagram.
And you can find us online at facebook.com/StorySmack. However, I'm woefully horrible at updating that page. So you can look there or just look at Scott Sigler or facebook.com/Scott Sigler. That's usually where we cover everything. We live stream StorySmack every second Saturday of the month. And you can find us at facebook.com/Scott Sigler, twitch.tv/Scott Sigler, and youtube.com/Scott Sigler.
In addition to StorySmack, we do a once weekly live stream called Sigler in Place on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. 6 p.m. Pacific time, right where you're watching this.
And we release an unabridged episode of a serialized novel every week. One of my novels, mind you. You can get episodes for free every Sunday via iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and more. Just go to scottsigler.com/subscribe for links.
And last but never least, Scott has a rad late afternoon Friday Twitch stream where he talks about pop culture monsters, and you can catch it on twitch.tv/Scott Sigler and wherever you're watching this now. And season 1 is going to be over in December, so check it out before it goes away.
And we have amazing guests on there. We just had Bronson Pinchot on. We got Yuri Lowenthal coming up. We just had Gail Carriger on. So we're really a bunch of authors, a bunch of actors, a bunch of interesting people talking about their favorite monster. And we hope you can subscribe so you can hear my books and more StorySmack goodness in the future. Until the next episode. Oh, wait, we got to switch cameras.
Yeah, we're going to switch cameras.
You guys listen to the podcast. We have cameras and stuff. You should join us for the live show. It's really fun.